Welcome everybody to the New Ways to Work webinar, The Future of Scalable Training and Work. I'm Mike Tringe, co-founder and CEO of CreatorUp. Really happy to be here with you today. To kick us off, I wanted to introduce us to Robert Sands, who is running the board and running the organization. So Robert, if you can just give us your story, tell us a little bit about New Ways to Work, and kick off this webinar with this incredible group of people that we have here today. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you, Michael. I really want to welcome everybody. New Ways to Work is an organization that's dedicated to young people and young people entering into the workforce. To me, there's no more critical issue that our young people are prepared for employment and prepared for life, prepared and equipped to take advantage of all that is changing in our world. And as you know, this past year has forced many of us in the workforce development world into Zoom, into new ways to work. And so apropos for our name. And unfortunately, I would say that many of us as practitioners were not prepared. And our young people weren't prepared. So we have issues that we need to be able to address to take advantage of the technology. But most importantly, we need to know what's out there. And Mike has assembled an incredible panel and just an impressive group of individuals that are going to share with you what are the opportunities. And we'll begin the discussion of how to connect and how to take advantage and how to make sure we're doing this in an equitable way, that our rural communities, our disconnected communities, our populations of foster, homeless, and probation youth are all in the forefront, that have the ability to take advantage of these new ways, this technology, and really our future of our economy. So I'm gonna get out of the way, but before I do that, I would really like to thank Mike and CreatorsUp and his team has just been fantastic in putting this together, as well as our other board members and supporting organizations. And I just want to read them off real quick. So Grants Associates, Workforce Solutions of the Coastal Bend, Jobs First in New York City, Circuit Riders of Sonoma County, New York Association of Training and Employment, and LA Orange County Regional Consortium. So I want to thank you all for supporting this event. This is the first of many as we hope to continue to bring this information and critical resources to the communities we serve. So thank you, panel. Thank you, Mike. And this is going to be a great webinar.
Thank you so much, Robert. And we are going to kick it off. So for everybody to know the general format, we're going to start with our platforms and our platform leaders and entrepreneurs. And so we have here from Coursera and from Big Spring, we've got Bhakti Pithalani. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. We also have from Coursera, Daryl Pincus. And I'm going to let you briefly introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about your organization. We have some content, and then we're going to get into some Q&A. So let's go ahead and get it kicked off with Coursera and Big Spring. And we're going to start with Bhakti from Big Spring, who's a good colleague and friend.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Bhakti Vittalani, and I founded Big Spring. We're a lifelong skilling platform that offers measurable ROI. I've been in the space of workforce development and skilling for a decade, and I feel like for a decade I've heard people say, look, we do training, we don't really know what happens afterwards. And that's what we're solving. That's why the measurable ROI. Before Big Spring, I worked with McKinsey. I'm trained as a software engineer. I worked in the Valley for several years. And I grew up in India and Mumbai. I've lived my life across the US, Singapore, and Mumbai. So great to be here and meet you guys today.
Great. And Bhakti, we're going to go ahead right into your presentation. So if you don't mind, Matt, is there a video that we can queue up, or are we going into the content?
Got a video to queue up, and Bhakti, you can hit it after the video wraps.
Big Spring, lifelong skilling with measurable ROI. Here's what we've heard for 10 years.
We do training, and then we don't know what happens.
We do training, and then we don't know what happens.
That's because watching a course means you've seen what good looks like. But that's not enough. On Big Spring, we move people beyond content. You learn by doing, with feedback from experts and peers. Our learners develop lifelong skills portfolios that showcase their best demonstrations at work. The Big Spring Pro Score measures our learners' proficiency. We ensure they are job ready, not just test ready. We're working with customers around the world to upskill their teams. Not only employees, but every touch point that matters to their business.
It's a great mobile learning program for influencers whom we would not be able to reach otherwise.
Practitioners demonstrated 1.5 times more conversions with 90% engagement.
This is the TikTok of learning.
This way of learning keeps in mind that I have a day job.
Big Spring is built for everyone.
Perfect. So, Big Spring is a lifelong skilling platform. And, just as perspective on what we think we're solving, we literally think the skills crisis that, we have in the world today, the situation where the number of people seeking jobs in the US is equal to the number of job openings, and there's a skills mismatch. This is a top 3% problem to be solved with massive consequences, societal, human, economic. What's driving this is the pace of change in the world. So, on the top left, you'll see this statistic that is just mind blowing. At the pace of change that we live in, 40% of a person's skills become obsolete every 3 years, which basically means if you're not upskilling in 10 years, your skills are obsolete, our skills are obsolete. So, gone are the days where, you could go to university or any kind of education or training program and then launch your career. Those days are just sort of gone. Lifelong skilling is a reality. It's, we must upskill to stay relevant. So that's the framing, that's sort of, if we think we do not solve this, and if we do not create direct pathways to employment for every people, there are going to be massive segments of people that are just excluded and left. And literally it will, impact how the world and society progresses. So that's the criticality of what we think we're solving, up there with climate change, up there with financial inclusion. Now, getting back in, so moving on to the next slide. If we get into the sort of root cause of, why do we have this skills crisis? Why is it that people are going through training or education, but then they say, we don't know what happens? Why is it that people seeking jobs and looking for jobs, and jobs exist, but they're not really, people seeking jobs are not equipped with, market relevant skills? We believe it's because of metrics and measurement. So, we live in a world where education is measured in terms of hours and test scores and course completions. But, that doesn't really speak to job readiness. Just because you can take a test doesn't mean, you can do a job. I always joke, I don't cook very frequently. I'm pretty sure, however, that I could watch a cooking video. I'm pretty sure I could pass a test on it. However, that said, the first time, at least, I don't think I could cook it, and I'd need some help and sort of practice and stuff like that. So we've really doubled down on, first principles. Learning happens by doing. And our entire product, our entire philosophy is anchored on this learning principle, the 10-20-70 learning principle. It's existed for decades, and it just speaks to how people learn. So 10% of learning happens through, theory, concepts, content. And then 20% of it happens through, apprenticeship. So now let's think about, driving a car, for instance, a practical life skill. Ultimately you can, so 10% is you're staring at the car, 20% is you get your hands on the wheel, and, you're starting to develop that muscle memory. Typically you have feedback from someone, a family member, or, driving instructor, and that's super important. And then the 70% is when you drive and you drive and you drive, and you get to a level of proficiency that you don't even realize you switched on the car. And learning happens in that sequence, in that proportion. You can't start day one getting behind the wheel, obviously, but you also can't spend all of your time staring at the car and expecting to know how to drive. So we've really anchored on this principle of, learning by doing. Now, moving on to the next slide. So the 10% is a super important part of it, though. Content is incredibly important. And, so we're always now thinking about how does one, how do we reinvent learning content in a world where, frankly, training content is typically considered boring. We're saying, hey, wait a second, YouTube is super engaging. YouTube gets lots of users, and turns out 70% of the searches on YouTube start with how to. So we think it's an awesome reference for learning content, and we really take inspiration from that. What makes YouTube so engaging? It's short form, it's more slice of life format versus classroom, it's relatable, it's mobile first, and it's current. It's a format that really lends itself to keeping up with the world. So much of the content on Big Spring is actually people at our customers, star performers at our customers, recording videos. So new product launches, the best salesperson records their pitch. New feature, the best engineer explains it to their peers to see. And this approach has become so very popular that we're actually literally, as we speak, launching the Big Spring Creator Academy, which Creator Up helped us to create with their fantastic experience. And with this, we're enabling basically everyday experts to record stuff, to share best practices and learning with their peers. And I literally think recording videos in this format is going to be one of the hottest life skills out there. And then we supplement this with Big Spring content. So there are evergreen skills that are available. People shouldn't need to reinvent the wheel on them. Critical sort of soft skills, I don't like that word, so we call them universal skills, but critical skills are really areas like design thinking, communications, critical thinking, mental health. So we do actually have a library of skills that we offer. But the bottom line is content is critical. Content means you can see what good looks like, but then there's more. So moving on to the next slide, with Big Spring, our learning approach is really focused on learning by doing. And we have this feature called a rep. The word rep is inspired from the world of fitness. So you go to the gym and you do reps of an exercise, and that's how you gain muscle memory. You really gain the strength. So similarly on Big Spring, we're saying, hey, these devices we have, these computers and mobile phones that we have, they're not only good for recording, for viewing content, they're also fantastic recording tools. Everyone now has a name and a face. So, capture videos, photos, text of, learning by doing. So literally our learners do this, and then they upload that on Big Spring and get, feedback, from each other. And again, we're really focused on, not just learning by doing, but also social learning. There's a ton of research that speaks to how people learn from each other. One of my favorite examples is, I was recently listening to a podcast by Jane Goodall, the conservationist. And someone asked her, how do chimps learn? And she said, they see, they imitate, and they repeat. And she's literally speaking to how, learning is at the heart of culture formation right there. And then McKinsey, for instance, has done research, people learn better in groups. It literally activates our parasympathetic nervous system. So we're very focused on the app. We're using tech, but people are at the center of it. And it's really anchored on learning by doing with feedback from mentors and peers. And then moving on to the next slide, what this looks like over time, on Big Spring, people are building these portfolios. And, I'd highly encourage this audience to explore this format, collect examples of your work and create a digital portfolio. We're used to documenting what we've been up to on social media, for instance. If you pick up my smartphone, you'll have a pretty good sense of what I've been sort of doing. So consider doing, the same for work, over the course of the week. Use your laptop, use your recording device, capture a pitch, capture a proposal you've created, what have you. And it's not something you need to do every day, maybe just once a week. But it's a format that's fantastic to capture what you're doing, to get feedback. And it really covers a range of skills, technical skills, soft skills, and so on. And this is a format that we call on Big Spring the digital skills portfolio. And it really encourages feedback now in a much more specific way, on stuff you're doing, presentations you're working on, and so on. And people can offer very concrete suggestions on making improvements that are actionable. And you can look back at your portfolio over 12 months, 6 months, and say, hey, here's how I've grown, here's how I've improved, look at what I've accomplished. So that's, so this, in a nutshell, is how Big Spring is really delivering on the promise of lifelong learning with measurable impact and making this a reality.
Thank you so much, Bhakti. And we're going to play your video now. Hopefully this time it will have some audio. So Matt, if you could cue that up, that would be great. Thank you.
We do training, and then we don't know what happens.
We do training and then don't know what happens.
I'm happy to walk through it, Mike, if you'd like to play.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. If we could just start it from the top.
Yeah, Matt, if you could bring us back to the beginning, and then Bhakti will do the voiceover. This is the real-time live stream. Thanks so much, Bhakti.
No worries. So yeah, we're a platform that offers lifelong skilling. I sort of spoke about that. And I joke for a decade.
We do training, and then we don't know what happens.
We do training and then don't know what happens.
So that's what I've heard, and that's the one part that's playing. And this is just the cooking example, frankly illustrated. You can watch a video, but the reality is, we've all been in that instance where we saw something and we were like, wait a second, this isn't exactly like, it isn't as easy as it seems. So here we have someone, live example, and this is a rep. She's capturing it, she's tagged, it's tagged, timestamped, and she's getting feedback from mentors and peers on, what to do. And, she finds her stride and she's getting more confident and things like that. So it's just sort of illustrating that learning journey, learning by doing with feedback. And here's the Big Spring Skills portfolio. So now, this grows over time. We have a little score that tracks your proficiency. It's not a test score, it's not hours of training, but it's actually a proficiency score. And this really measures, are you job ready or test ready? Here's some of our clients. And we work with clients not just for full-time employees, but across the board for every touch point in their ecosystem. And here's a testimonial from Facebook. We're working with their news partnerships team to upskill journalists. We're working with Google. This is a Google testimonial. We're working with, to upskill people on Google Ads. And, to me, this is awesome. In a world where enterprise learning is considered so boring, we find it great that people find this as consumer grade as TikTok. And this just demonstrates the breadth of things that can be captured in this format. We are what we call an all-color platform. So thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Bhakti. I'm going to turn it over to Daryl to do a quick intro. Then we're going to play Daryl's video. Then we're going to get into his content and then to Q&A. So Daryl, if you want to just introduce yourself from Coursera, please. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you guys for having me today. I'm excited to be here. Daryl Pincus from Coursera. I'm on our content team. Just for some quick context, Coursera was started by two Stanford professors with the idea of let's unlock the walls of our classroom and be able to give a world-class education to everyone anywhere across the world. Fast forward a few years, about 3.5 years ago, when I started with Coursera, we said, hey, great content is actually happening within companies. And that's happening within onboarding, within internship programs, within really developing people for roles. And so we started working with these organizations such as Google, Facebook, Salesforce to unbound that training and take it from within the walls of the organization and really give it to the world. And in this presentation and in this video, I'll help connect some of those dots. So let's cue the video.
Nebraska. It's a beautiful state. It's not only a beautiful state, it's a beautiful state of mind. My fiance got her first teaching job here in Grand Island, Nebraska. And I made the choice to drop out of college and move to Grand Island. When I first got here, I found that I couldn't get work. Without a college degree, most people in this area are going to struggle. Eventually, I found a job at Central Community College as a night shift security officer. I felt like I was just fighting an uphill battle. Like I wouldn't be able to gain any traction in my career. I've worked with computers my entire life. That is what I love. I have a friend currently going through an IT program, and he said, hey, you should search for Google's IT support program. Just seeing that, I thought this is something that I can do. I probably would average 10 to 12 hours a week. I finished the program in 5 months. I was almost in tears when I got done with the course. Soon after that, I got an email for a job opening on Central Community College's IT team.
When we were viewing Daniel, what shined in his resume was his Google credentials he brought with him. It really did stand out against the majority of our other candidates.
I love my new job. I think one of the most validating things in the world is recognizing that you've helped someone. It's wild that I can claim that I'm doing what I love, but I also have more time to spend with the people I love.
Daryl, that video touches me because I'm from Nebraska, so I love that video. But I want to have you tell the story of what Coursera is doing with partners like Google.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And Daniel's story is really one of many. We start with the learner. And in this case, imagine a learner comes to Coursera, if you can go to the next animation, and they think, what do I want to do? Maybe I'm the night security guard and I want to transform my life. Maybe I'm working at Starbucks and I'm a barista and I think, I'd love to work, in an enterprise. I'd like to transfer roles. So they come to Coursera and they do some discovery, and then they find this Google IT support professional certificate. And now the learner can take it asynchronously on their own, and it's all mastery learning. So it's short vignettes from real Googlers on how to do simple concepts. And then there's assessments, hands-on projects, and testing. And as you master those skills, you do more difficult skills. If you can click to the next slide. But many learners, and this is just some stats of the number of learners that have been coming through these programs. What's really interesting is online education 3-4 years ago was mainly learners that already had a degree. But what we're seeing is this whole flux of new learners coming to our platform who are looking for those first foundational skills, really looking for the pathway for that first role. And as I talked about, many learners are going through this program on their own, but we're also, Coursera is also partnered with Goodwill, Merit America, community colleges, where we recognize we have this strong learning experience taught by Googlers in this case. But some learners like wraparound support. They want to go through with a cohort. They want a network, a community, a coach, or even a live instructor. So our same content that a learner can take through on their own, they could also take through these partners, these workforce partners. If you can move to the next slide or the next animation. And in addition to having this training program that's skills focused, where we assess learners that have all the skills tied to the job role, not only Google, but over 100 different companies have said, we would love to hire from this talent pool. So when a learner completes this program, they then have access to apply directly to these companies, and these companies have committed to reviewing this qualified talent pool for their roles. You can go to the next slide. In addition to that, we took the Google IT support program through the American Council on Education, the ACE credit recommendation process. And this program has a 12 credit recommendation. So what that means is there's hundreds of colleges across the US and frankly, even across the globe that will recognize this as a stackable credential. So if a learner finishes this program, and for example, if they decide to go to UNT's bachelor degree program, they're going to be able to bring in 12 credits. So you're starting off with almost a semester's worth of credit by going through this 5-month program on Coursera. Let's continue to the next slide. So what is this program, and why am I so passionate about it, and why am I so excited to talk to you guys today? We all know that over the last year, everything we thought, all these trends we thought that were going to occur over the next 5 years happened overnight. And this was especially seen with lower skilled workers, frontline workers, or workers without degrees. Let's go to the next chart. You guys have probably seen this statistic, but if you look at when we really started to shut down in March of 2020, those workers with a bachelor degree or higher, maybe there was some displacement, but those jobs came back pretty quickly. But as you can see at the different education levels, especially learners without a high school diploma or just high school graduates, not only were they displaced, but the rate of those jobs coming back has been much, much slower. And in some cases, some of these roles may have just been completely displaced with technology and new ways of doing things. So let's go to the next slide. Perfect. So this is a McKinsey study, the future of work, partnered with MC, which is just a big data provider. But what it basically shows is there's these low wage origin jobs on the left side of the chart. And then there's these high wage destination jobs, really where someone could have a family living wage, but it's very hard to cross that chasm, to get from the left side to the right side, even though there's skills transferability. But what McKinsey identified was what they coined these gateway roles. These are roles that many times people could get with very little experience in that vertical, and also many times without a degree. And also many of the skills they had in their other jobs actually were applicable and transferable. So what we're doing at Coursera is we're trying to look at learners, and you can go to the next slide. And real quick, many of these roles on the left side tend to be shrinking over time, and many on the right side really are growing due to digitization. So the question we're trying to answer, and then the problem we're trying to solve, is how do we get learners from the left side with great transferable experience and skills? How do we do a gap analysis on them and make sure that they're prepared to get these middle foundational gateway roles to set them up where they're in a role, they have the foundational knowledge, and they're gaining the work experience to open the doors to all of these roles on the right side of the chart. If you go to the next slide. So when you think of Coursera, we're really this ecosystem of learners coming to us with all different experiences and backgrounds, assessing who they are and helping discover their passion of where they want to go, and then laying it out with content where there's the entry-level professional certificate, there's more advanced content tied to more advanced roles, all the way up into degrees. So what we see ourselves in this ecosystem, Coursera is a network where learners can come and be connected to high quality content that's tied to the career path of where they want to go. You can go to the next slide. And these are just examples of the entry-level programs we have on our platform today that are job role aligned. So the gateways that McKinsey has talked about, here's how we're working with partners and organizations really to bring these to life. And where I'm curious to potentially work with those on this call, so feel free to reach out to me. If you have a learner base that's looking to get into some of these new growing careers, what's really that first step? And how are these companies looking to train the talent of tomorrow? How are they looking to certify them? It's really through a lot of these programs where that foundational knowledge and training happens, and then these companies are looking to hire the talent directly from these programs. So that's the end of my slides, Mike. I didn't know, are we going on? Or
yeah, no, that's perfect. I think what we've learned here is that these platforms that have been invented in the last 10 years or 5 years are transforming in collaboration with corporate partners, the way in which people learn and the way in which they get work, and making everything more accessible. And so we do have a theme of access here. I'm just going to ask one question, then we're going to move on to our next group because we have to stay on time here. But around this theme of access, both for Bhakti and for Daryl, and really anyone on the panel, feel free to check out the chat. How accessible is like Big Spring or these certificate programs for people with disabilities or across different types of learning like software development? Let's talk about that theme of access for just a moment, and then we're going to move on to the next group. So I'll let Bhakti, you're in a completely different time zone, 12 hours ahead. You probably want to go to sleep. I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, thank you for having me, and that's absolutely, not a problem. So accessibility is something that we think about incredibly actively. We've created this platform. I found it always very curious, when I speak to Big Spring and that it's a learning platform, people will frequently say, who do you train and what do you train them on, right? And as an engineer and as a sort of tech forward person, I find that curious because no one is asking Netflix that, no one is asking Amazon that. So we've really created something that extends to every type of worker. It could be a construction worker, it could be a knowledge worker, it could be a frontline hospitality worker. The app is very multilingual and multi-literacy friendly. So we're always saying we literally have 20 words on the app apart from content. So that's another way that we look at it. And between, for instance, photos, videos, sort of text, and the different formats, we really do cater to lots of different types of learning as well. I'm sure there's going to be some areas that we cannot necessarily cater to, but overall, for folks that come from, with limited hardware, limited bandwidth, mixed literacy, mixed lingual sort of capabilities, we're fairly conscious to make sure that the product is accessible. So, we're literally working with small and medium businesses in West Africa, journalists in different part of the world, but also knowledge workers like Google, and it works across the board.
Thank you, Bhakti. Daryl, did you want to chime in here on this topic? And then I think Ken also asked if these are industry standard credentials.
Yeah, so I guess let me approach the other question first. I think one of the most interesting things about using technology to reach learners, in addition to everything Bhakti said about making it accessible, having transcripts translated into multiple languages, I think is the fact that when you're learning new technologies, sometimes just setting up your ecosystem to learn, downloading a piece of software, all of that leads to a lot of frustration. And sometimes, say you're in a library, you can't even download a piece of software to start learning on. On our platform, the way it works is you just need to be able to link to Coursera.org, and everything happens within the website. So a virtual machine is spun up that already has all the applications and data sets and things you need to use. So when we think about accessibility, all you need is access to Coursera.org, and you're going to be able to do the full learning experience without any additional environment setup.
Daryl, Bhakti, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. You're welcome to hang out. Bhakti, maybe you want to get some sleep, and see you tomorrow morning. I'm going to move on to our next group. And so Matt, if you could please pull up the presentation from USC. So now we're moving to our institutions and our movers and shakers with Bitwise Industries. So we've got USC, Tara Hine Phillips is here with us. Representing from UCLA is Catherine Mogul, Greg Barish, and then I have with us from Bitwise, Michelle Score. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start us off with Tara.
Thanks so much, Mike, and thanks for having me. Just in terms of giving a quick overview of who I am, I've been working in technology and education probably in some combination of those, quite a lot of the last 20 years, but it isn't where I started. I started my career as a playwright and then decided to teach myself how to code and, learn something about technology. And I found myself very much at that intersection point between the business and the technologist as a sort of natural consequence of all of that. And it's funny for me in some ways to find myself at a university now because I am a lifelong, very non-traditional learner. So I think I understand the mindset of somebody who jumps around a lot and wants to do a lot of different things, or maybe has had a lot of starts and stops in various ways. So I bring some of that to this conversation. And I'm just recently, the most recent educational venture that I worked on was with Sundance. I built the Sundance Collab over the last couple of years, which became a big global community for artists. And that's where some of the inspiration for Skill Up comes from, this idea of bringing people together with education and community, really marrying those two things. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So a lot of I'm not going to focus too hard on some of the things that I think we've already heard today, but as you'll see, there's some similar themes. I have, in 15 years of consulting with companies, I've encountered quite a lot of skill gaps. And what strikes me about them is the mismatch, even in perspectives, right, around what those skill gaps are, what employers think those are, what employees think those are, what, and how people are addressing those things. So for me, my work, I'm trying to center around that bit in the middle, the pit of despair that people find themselves falling into around not knowing how to solve this problem. Next slide, please. And so this, this one really gets back to the point that we just heard earlier. There's just skill gaps change all the time, and they're ever evolving. And I think it's fascinating that when asked, 70% of people don't feel that they have the skills they need to do the jobs that they're actually in. And just the, just when you think from an organizational sort of psychology standpoint, like what that does to a worker's motivation and confidence and all the other problems that creates in the workplace, never mind like even getting those jobs, but just being able to maintain those jobs and having those skills feels like it has such a massive impact on productivity. Next slide, please. And this, I've seen some questions in the chat around credentials, and credentials certainly help, right? We saw that slide earlier. There's no question that especially when the chips are down, people without credentials are hit harder. But people with credentials also don't feel adequately prepared, and employers also don't feel that credentials are preparing people well enough for work. So it does feel like in the future, some blend of these things is going to have to be necessary. Next slide, please. The gaps for me, just thinking about where those gaps are, they reside, I feel, at the intersection point to a large extent between these hard and soft skills. So there's this great list over to the right, and everybody's trying to address this. But what I've experienced in my career is that people are almost afraid to address skill gaps. And I feel like it almost means that you have to admit you have a problem to even start to acknowledge that there's a critical thinking problem in your organization. Or maybe you think you're creative, but like, what would it mean to say our leaders don't have creativity, or our creative team doesn't have creativity? So I think some of it is recognizing where those skill gaps are, but really drilling down into what those gaps are and how to address them as effectively as possible. Next slide, please. So that's how I came to this idea of Skill Up. I was brought to USC to really start thinking about what lifelong learning might look like for working adults, and how USC could play a role in that. And for me, and there's no video to accompany any of this yet, because this is a brand new idea. You've probably the first 100 people hearing it. But the idea is to really meet people where they are with their skill gaps at the point of need. So really try and understand what are the gaps, how, and why is someone even searching to remediate this skill, and really try to meet them where they are. As we heard earlier, connect them with communities of practice, connect them to peers, create groups around this so that those skill gaps can be addressed in multiple ways. And then also give people that opportunity to rise up, and become leaders in the community so that they are the ones contributing back, raising their own professional profile around skills that maybe they weren't credentialed for, but they've become really good at, and they really want to be able to share back to the community. So we're very clear, especially on this point, that this might be somebody who's 23 years old. Somebody with skills in your organization is a real leader at something, or a thought leader at something, might not necessarily mean seniority in the traditional sense. Next slide, please. So when I started to analyze where the skills fall and what would give us the most flexibility to create those skills in a just-in-time way, we kind of saw them as bucketed into 4 places around digital fluency. Even more than the idea of having technical or software skills, it's the idea for some people just how to use the new tools that, as we hear, change every 3 years. So that might be for somebody, somebody who used to be able to do customer service one way or marketing one way has to do it a very different way now. Resilience. It's one thing to say we want to tackle racial equity or diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I would love to think of us, diving more into that and thinking about things like, how do we navigate social justice as a company? Do you give people time off for protests? How do you manage that as how do you ask for that time off? What does a company say as a consequence of things that are happening in the world, and how do companies navigate this? So that's like a just in time aspect that gets to something that's a little bit different than just DEI, I think. Same approaches for productivity and this idea of skill adjacency. If we're doing this right, then hopefully people can transition from one skill to another. Next slide, please. So this is just, I won't read through this, but this is an example of how we're breaking this down, but like taking a skill, a skill area, breaking it down to the core skill, breaking it out by career level, because what somebody needs when they're starting their career is different than the person who's going to manage that person, or the leader who has to put the strategy in place around that. And then trying to bring people together in community to work on these industry specific capstones. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we support the community, I've often thought that it's amazing now that I have such a big network. If I don't know something and I sort of want to be able to seem like I know it, I could probably do a deep dive with somebody in my network for 2 hours who can give me the core concepts. I can jot those down and I can think to myself, okay, so I know how to do this now, at least enough to sort of say I do. So that's the kind of thing we want to be able to create, this kind of mentoring, peer, support. And we're hoping that, by starting with the alumni at USC, but opening this up to the community, that there's a built-in trust network, I hope, that comes along with that makes people willing to share. And then, also this idea of showcasing community talent, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. I think it's really important to think about both formal and informal learning, this idea that people kind of push and pull learning across career levels. So, making sure that we have opportunities for people to do things together, do them on their own, or do them, as I said, sort of in a group or in community on an ongoing basis, or even as a one-off. So, we're going to try to really think about that. And just back to the point on accessibility, part of what I learned at Sundance is, it's sometimes the simpler things around accessibility that matter. I think making sure that everything's mobile friendly, that everything is low enough bandwidth, or, able to be watched multiple times, that you're not just doing things in real time that people can't come back to. And then, everything has a transcript, everything's translatable into another language, and that everything's machine readable makes a lot of those things a lot better. And then obviously, like, just building into your design, like some just really good thoughtfulness around that. Next slide, please. I threw this slide on because I sort of feel like this, I relate to this so much as a person. And I if this community could do anything, it would, break down the barriers that I think that exist around saying you need to still learn, or that you want to learn something different, which can feel really daunting. I think creating a culture of ongoing learning will help us to develop the sort of natural filling of these skill gaps as people can engage their curiosity. And especially in the workplace, like taking away the stigma around not having a skill and making it really an exciting and ongoing prospect of just gaining, sort of new skills as a thing that you just naturally do, is where I would hope this community would really fulfill its promise.
Great. Thank you so much, Tara. Did you also have a video, or are we good to go with the presentation?
I don't have a video because I hope to have an exciting video for this soon. But, I'm working with a company called Creator Up who's going to help me.
Oh, I've heard of them. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tara. I want to turn it over to Michelle, because Michelle's coming at this from a completely different perspective. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about how Bitwise is approaching the future of training workforce.
Thanks so much, Mike. Great to be here. Michelle Score. I'm the Chief Workforce Officer for Bitwise. And just an intro about myself, been sitting at the intersection of education, training, and technology for the last 15 to 20 years. Looking at that, originally coming in, I myself am a first generation college student, grew up in the Central Valley, not only not access or equity in terms of what an education pathway might look like, but also subsequently what any sort of career pathways might look like. And so not even understanding how to bridge skills and skills acquisition and what I might need into understanding what career opportunities might be. So for me, this is really the work that we do at Bitwise is the culmination of both helping people gain new skills, skill up or reskill, but also directly connecting that to the outcomes that they have in terms of immediate or future employment. So a little bit about me. I think we'll do the video and then get into the slides.
Great.
What is Bitwise? We're glad you asked. Bitwise is a tech ecosystem that activates human potential to lift up underdog cities around the country. Let's see that again. Bitwise is a tech ecosystem that activates human potential to lift up underdog cities around the country. What does that mean? Good question. Imagine a line of dominoes waiting to be tipped over, each essential to knocking over the next and causing a chain reaction in the technology industry. Our first domino is education. Underdog cities are filled with resilient, gritty people just a few skills away from solving important challenges in tech. So, we teach people to code with a specific focus on building on-ramps for those traditionally left out of the tech industry. The more people we teach, the more talent grows, creating an army of developers ready to share their brilliance with the world. We call it GeekWise Academy. GeekWise knocks over our second domino, place. We build world-class tech venues and lease state-of-the-art space, creating a place for talent and opportunity to connect and thrive. Students, companies, and like-minded talent collaborate and innovate, leveling up the tech industry. This vibrant community knocks over our third domino, industry. Here, companies are created to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. Our flagship company, Shift3 Technologies, hires the very best out of GeekWise. This proves it's possible to build top-flight tech companies in unexpected places, all with the diverse, non-traditional talent produced at GeekWise. In each venue, GeekWise and Shift3 grow alongside other amazing tech companies, building an inclusive tech industry in each underdog city. That growth creates tech jobs and opportunity in every direction, thus sprouting non-tech jobs at an even faster rate. That growth spills out of Bitwise to neighboring developments. It buys homes and pays taxes. That growth begins to impact every facet of the entire city. Looking back at that first domino, GeekWise Academy, we see it started everything. It empowered humans to improve their own lives, and in the process, transform their city. That's Bitwise.
Awesome video. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks so much. And speaking to Tara's point, we have rebranded this year. So we are now Workforce Training instead of GeekWise Academy. So if you look us up, that's what you'll see on the Bitwise website. But wanted to talk specifically about the education component and workforce training and how Bitwise and how we define workforce, which is really those two ecosystems that we talk about, really relate to how we're thinking about skills and skilling folks up. The essential component for us is that inside of the education model where we're moving folks through our training and skilling programs is we are taking what we know about that's happening in tech or tech adjacent employment and breaking down those skills in order to teach folks the exact skill building blocks they need to gain employment, and then ourselves and the employment partners that we have hiring those individuals. So in some of the comments that I've seen about our folks looking at credentialing program, are they looking at alternative training or skilling programs in terms of hires, and how do they make a pathway inside of their hiring to do that? And we're seeing that more and more. There's work to be done there, but I think that we're creating a lot more bridges into alternative education and credentialing pathways instead of traditional education programs, just relying on that for the skills that are needed in terms of employment. And essential to us is that we're always talking about training and we're always talking about skilling as it relates to employment, high wage, high growth, living wage jobs. So our workforce training program, the essential element for that is our apprentice program. You'll see here a few of the folks that we have in our training program, along with the type of apprentice programs that we have. For us, the key factor here is that we're paying people to learn. So when folks enter our apprentice program with us, we're paying them for 40 hours a week. We're giving them medical benefits. We're teaching them over 6 months to a year the skills that they need, because we know that those are the skills as in our tech consulting business. We know the projects we're working on and the skills necessary to execute on those projects. And we break those down to ensure we're teaching not just the technical skills in the apprentice program, but as so many folks eloquently talked about here, what are those other skills that we know are necessary as you are interviewing people for teams, right, that matter as much in terms of, can you be a good Salesforce developer, but what are the other pieces about how do you work on cross-functional, or in this new world, distributed teams? How do you work and understand what those tools and that communication and those working styles are that are as important about you having a successful and productive team member as about the skills that we're teaching you for how to learn to be a successful Salesforce administrator. Next slide. This was the 3-part overview that you heard about in the video. We are 3 parts to what we do: workforce training, a technology consulting business that ships world-class software. And for us, we have moved, of course, in this last year virtually. We already offered much of our training program in a virtual environment, but for us, really important is place. And that is, how do we connect and build culture and community? For us, we're significantly looking in the communities that we serve to look at overlooked populations. And we know, looking at things like barriers and social determinants of health, that those are factors that contribute to how even a person can take a first step into accessing skills or training or any sort of educational training programs to reskill or upskill themselves. Next slide. This is a little bit about the communities that we do work with. And in doing so, again, as we are hiring those folks into our tech consulting business, ensuring that we're building the most diverse technology workforce, we also want to ensure in doing that, that we have, we're thinking about that at the outreach side of who we're bringing into the program, and ensuring that that's representative of the workforce as folks are gaining employment, whether that's inside of the Bitwise ecosystem in all of the cities across the United States we're now serving, and or that our employer partners are ready to hire the folks we are moving through our training programs. Next slide. This was a little bit about the soft skills that I was talking about earlier, thinking about the communication, collaboration, and confidence. I think for us, really breaking those down with the support services that we have virtually, folks get a student success mentor that moves through the training programs with them so that they have the support that they need to be successful in the classroom. Asking those folks to connect with the folks who are teaching the classes, but also ensuring that they have what we believe is all the wraparound services that are essential to the knowledge acquisition that's happening in these training and reskilling programs. Next slide. Looks like that's a duplicative slide here. The only last thing that I want to say, that I've seen a couple comments here. For us, thinking about how we do this is really thinking also about how we're working with workforce boards, how we're understanding the ecosystems of employment with which these training and reskilling programs are tied, that we aren't siloed in thinking just about the training or reskilling moment, but ensuring we're tying this directly to outcomes about what that means. For us, folks entering training and reskilling on average are making about $20,000 a year, and exiting in our program, getting paid immediately into that apprenticeship program, $45,000 a year, and exiting at $65,000 a year. Those are the tangible outcomes where we're connecting across the board, both employment and outcomes specifically related to the training and reskilling that we do inside of Bitwise. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And there are a few questions here that I'd love to have our panelists answer in the chat. Meanwhile, I'd like to introduce Catherine, and also with Catherine, maybe we've lost, no, Greg, there he is. Catherine and Greg to talk about their work at UCLA.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Mogul. I'm a associate clinical professor as of last month at UCLA. And I am a psychologist by training. So my background is really child and family trauma. And some of the work I've been doing over the last 20 years really focuses on shifting systems of care to become more trauma informed and resilience promoting. So that's me, and Greg is here with me.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. And I'm pleased to be presenting with Catherine. My name is Greg Barish. I'm the founder of Alliance Logic, and I'm a computer scientist by training, specializing in digital health and cybersecurity. And I have to say, one of the great things, and it's very symbolic of our presenting together, is as a computer scientist, it's very often tech companies go off and they just go build something instead of working with people in the field, actually trying to do this kind of education and retraining. And I've been very fortunate to work with UCLA as we build our Wellbeing for LA Learning Center platform. These interdisciplinary opportunities, I cannot understate enough. I cannot overstate enough how important they are. You really have to work with a diverse set of people. So thank you for having me.
Shall we go ahead and watch the video and then we can come back and talk a little bit more about.
Let's do that. Yes, perfect.
What do we mean in the world of mental health when we say prevention? In mental health, prevention involves building protective factors and skills, increasing social support and connection, and learning to manage stress and reduce risk factors or stressors. This reduces potential long-term consequences of trauma, adversity, and mental health problems, and can advance individual and family well-being. The Prevention Center of Excellence helps LA County thrive through a comprehensive approach that encourages trauma and resilience-informed county systems. We do this by creating a culture of collaborative learning and connection across county systems, leading to a stronger, more resilient workforce and community. Supported by innovative research and training platforms, the Center of Excellence uses evidence-based educational tools and programs to enhance self-care and prevention strategies throughout our community. By working together, we believe we can help to build a strong foundation of support for LA County's workforce and residents. The Center of Excellence offers customized training programs tailored to serve the diverse communities and agencies of LA County. We work with community members and providers to identify goals, adapt to each group's unique circumstances, and support implementation strategies. The Center of Excellence provides access to a diverse array of experts and experience, both in person and online, with trainings that range from hour-long overviews to more in-depth practice-based curricula, allowing for more immersive understanding of concepts. To reinforce the practices taught in trainings, the Center of Excellence provides ongoing consultation calls, online meetings, and access to advanced training courses. This support ensures continuity of learning to sustain our communities over time. Together, we will strengthen the network of support for children, families, and adults throughout Los Angeles County.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And then let's go ahead and get into the material.
Okay, well, so we are a part of the Department of Mental Health, which is the largest mental health system in the country, our LA County Department of Mental Health, and the UCLA Public Partnership for Wellbeing. And the goal of our work is really to kind of bridge the gap of evidence-based practice that's often developed at academic centers, but sometimes doesn't make its way out into the community. And so we're really blending our evidence-based practice with experts from UCLA with practice-based evidence that is developed among our providers in LA County. And we're trying to really strengthen those providers, whether they're soccer coaches, teachers, nurses, doctors, mental health professionals, basically anyone who's providing any service to the residents in LA County, to become more trauma-informed and resilience promoting. Essentially, those are sort of the new buzzwords, but really we're just training people to be kinder and gentler with each other so that we have a better place to live in LA County. And we're doing that through strengthening communities, re-engineering systems. And this is where we really want to talk about how we've been able to leverage technology to help re-engineer these systems, whether it's child welfare, whether it's education, whether it's mental health, to come together and learn together to then revitalize policy. Next slide. So we're doing this through a series of different types of training modalities. We have self-paced courses that are, to be honest, we're actually using a lot of our partnership with Creator Up to create really engaging courses that have sort of a narrative, maybe following people, a social worker in LA County throughout her day and how she interacts with people that are involved in the child welfare system, or a librarian who is maybe struggling to manage the disconnect sometimes of having to provide some services and social work, essentially, even though they're not trained in social work, but then having to go do circle time with a bunch of kids. So how do they navigate that day that has become more and more diverse in terms of having to provide de facto mental health in a library, or our teachers are definitely becoming de facto mental health providers as we enter this, leaving a health global crisis and entering a mental health global crisis. So we do that through the self-paced courses, the virtual trainings, which are live, and I think that's an important piece of what we offer. And we also then have recorded anytime sessions. And learning pathways. So we've heard a lot from, for example, at LA Unified, that they wanted sort of these micro credentials or micro learning pathways to help their teachers and their educators and their staff to better understand the needs of youth and families in LA County. So we've set up a series of learning pathways to help them do that. And then we also have resource collections. So these are downloadable tip sheets, downloadable resource guides to help somebody when they're not online be able to interact appropriately, as I said, in a trauma-informed, gentle way with residents in LA County. We have videos, we have mobile tools, websites. So there's a kind of a variety of asset types that we have. And Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you to say a little bit more.
Thanks, Catherine. Next slide, please. So Catherine talked about a number of modalities. That's really one of the experimental things we're doing with this learning center. Is it's not just a series of videos. It's a bunch of different modalities. We try everything we can to reach out to people and combine them in some cases with live access to folks in person. In fact, for pre-COVID, UCLA had done a tremendous number of in-person trainings. So the real sort of goal here is how can we reach people most effectively through a combination of in-person and virtual, increasingly virtual, because of the scale factor. But how can we not alienate people because of just making everything virtual, right? So one of the things we spend a lot of time on in the past several months because of the pandemic has been these live virtual trainings, going beyond the simple Zoom meeting, if you will. And what we're trying to do is look at how can we engage people through a variety of configurations of these trainings. They often have characteristics such as we want to group people together and we want to keep them together for some period of time. So we might have multiple sessions that we meet with them. We, of course, try to use features of platforms like Zoom, like breakout rooms and so forth. But, we want to really we want to use Zoom and technologies like it, not limited to Zoom, as a tool. So it could be any other virtual meeting technology, Teams or whatever. And we're just looking at how can that be a component of an overall training objective, and how can we combine these together so that when we come out of the pandemic, what is really the right blend of, what is the right formula for hybrid? How can we combine the power of scale with the ability to reach out people and anytime where they are at on their schedule? And so these virtual trainings have given us the ability to do things like make certain trainings, restricted to certain groups so that we can get, let's say a whole school district in there or a particular school in a particular training without having others in there. So the discussion can be very, very relevant to them. Engage them before and after with pre and post materials, engage them through certificates and CE credits, giving them a reason to attend or at least encourage them more to attend beyond their natural interest. And again, these sorts of things have really been have really come up in bloom during, ironically, during the COVID era. In fact, as an example, the Department of Child and Family Services is one of the folks that we've trained, and they have thousands of workers. I think around 9,000 workers. We've trained many thousands of them in the past year. I think almost over 75% of them through this method. And it's not always an easy audience because not everybody is very comfortable with technology. So it's been a real learning experience, and we think our formula has really started to show a lot of progress with folks, even if they're not technology first. Next, and that before I go to the next slide, I would say these virtual trainings have allowed us to now segue into our next capability, which I'll highlight on the next slide, please. So the other thing we've done to complement virtual training are to develop these peer-to-peer learning communities. And you can think of these as sort of a social media sort of group, like a Facebook page, but going beyond that, I mean, technologies like Facebook and their groups, private and public, inspire us to say, well, what's going on here, and how can we really use this in a more in different ways? And so what we've done is to try to actually build these workspaces, if you will, these sort of communities, learning communities, we call them, often between practitioners. So for example, folks who tend to work with older adults, social workers who work with older adults, folks who work are early educators. And in this case, you're seeing one of the examples of that. We have a cohort called the Early Childhood Fellowship that UCLA runs with the Department of Mental Health, and every year they accept about 30 or so folks in. And for the duration of an academic year, they work on showing them new ways to work with younger children and cover issues that are sort of beyond what they would find day to day as a way of enhancing their skill and capability. And so these end up being safe spaces for peers to engage each other. Our hope here is that the learning now happens between folks who are practitioners. So librarians talking to other librarians, educators talking to other educators, and making it continual. It's not just limited to the course that they took on March 10th. It's going on for months and months, and it allows them, to reach out to their fellow peer who's working in LA County and say, look, how are you dealing with this problem in your classroom? Or how are you dealing with this problem in your environment that we share together? And so that's one of the novel things that we're doing to complement virtual training. Those are just two examples. I'm going to turn it back over to Catherine at this point.
So next slide, please. And related to that, we're allowing them to not just talk about how they're managing things, but we have downloadable assets that they might download to use with a child. And then they may say, well, gosh, this one just didn't quite work. The kid I'm working with actually really prefers, I don't know, the Incredible Hulk or some other, metaphor for whatever they're learning. And so then they can change the worksheet that we've given them and re-upload it and share with the community, so that we then have multiple versions of the same, worksheet or tip sheet that could be used with children from diverse backgrounds and with diverse interests. And so through all of this, we're actually we really are re-engineering the systems and strengthening the communities by equipping employees with the information and skills they need, and helping to strengthen the network of support across LA County, so that a social worker actually knows firsthand, by first name basis, someone in mental health or knows a good pediatrician in the area for the child that they're serving, and can actually make a phone call and do a warm handoff instead of just saying, here's a list of resources for you, which, as we know, our families, particularly our families that are served by our service systems, are often not really kind of guided or walked through how to navigate these really complex systems. So we're strengthening that network of support and revitalizing policy by training employees and providers in LA County who have a reach of over 7.5 million county residents across all 5 of our supervisorial districts. And we're able to use our social vulnerability index across LA County to make sure that we're putting the trainings and the resources and deploy them in the places where they're most needed across our county.
Catherine and Greg, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And thanks to the whole team from USC and Bitwise and UCLA for bringing this to the table. We're going to move into our VR section. And so I'm going to turn it over to Guido, who is the leader, the co-founder of Warp VR. And I think we're going to play a video here.
Definitely. So let me first do a short introduction. Guido Amhorst, coming to you from the Netherlands, one of the co-founders of Warp VR, and I have a background in the airline industry. So the airline hangar was basically for many years my domain, and we had these evacuation trainings. These drills once a year, the alarm goes, everybody knows it, and then you walk out, and basically everybody follows each other, because probably my colleague in front will know the drill, and then you're outside and you walk back in. So, and that's the whole training. And we thought, okay, this doesn't bring confidence. I didn't feel confident in actually being able to manage such a situation. So we thought this could be and should be different. And we found a solution in virtual reality. And down the line, after founding Warp VR, we also saw many other applications. So let's go to the video to show you what we do.
Perfect. Thanks, Guido. Here we go. Awesome. So what you just saw was a platform to create your own VR training scenarios. And these are learning by doing environments. So I kind of remind people it's a choose your own adventure. Those books, some of you might know. And then you can turn to page 8, because then you influence the story. So this is, well, let's say 21st century choose your own adventure. And the reason, next slide, please. And what we built was a platform where we enable other companies to create such VR training scenarios, really based on learning by doing it yourself. But especially, we're all human, so we learn by failing, by making mistakes, by experiencing consequences. But those situations are not always available, or they're costly, or hard to come by, especially at scale. So now we have built this platform where you can easily create such scenarios. So it's a tool, yes, it's also services. So we are proud to also have CreatorUp as one of our partners to combine skills in providing VR training scenarios. And we use 360 video. So it's real people, real emotion, real situations in that sense. And we're also building a Warp store, so that's more off-the-shelf content. So on demand, for example, for soft skills. So next slide, please. Because you might think, okay, this is VR, so it's super techy, difficult headsets. But we also
found a way to provide it on just a mobile phone or on mobile devices. So we saw that you really need those stepping stones in going to maybe to a VR headset, but now it's also available to play it just on your own mobile phone or on your tablet. So then, it becomes really scalable. So you can train as easy 8 people as you can train 8,000 or 80,000. It doesn't really matter. You can do it. It's a creation tool. So we put the tool in the hands of the creators. You need a 360 camera, and then you're good to go. You can collaborate and create your own story and do the storyboarding in the tool. Of course, and that's also what we heard earlier in this session, it's all about knowledge, but now also connecting it to practice. So the integration with, for example, learning management systems enables you to really make VR and therefore practical, situational, on-the-job training part of those learning journeys. And it's, the fourth part is basically there are also off-the-shelf scenarios available. So you don't have to create. You can also say, hey, we need something on soft skills, on dealing with emotion or dealing with aggression or whatever the topic is. And you can turn to basically the library. Next slide. Just to say, different applications going from onboarding to recruitment. In essence, we can put you in any situation. Depending on your learning goal, you can create that a situation at scale. Last slide. We've seen, these are a couple of partners and clients we work with. So we see applications in the safety area, of course, safety awareness. How do you deal with those situations where you have to be safety aware, but all this stuff is happening around you, and that's real life. So we really try to get as close to real life as possible to put those learners in. We created a bank robbery, and again, this is all from the premise of putting people in situations before they actually are in the situation. So they have experience. I'll leave it at that, just to be as short as possible. What I will do is I will put a link in the chat, and you guys can click the link and you can try it on your own mobile phone, couple of demos, just try it, see how easy it is to actually, be in a situation yourself, either customer service or safety, all up to you. Thank you for having me.
Guido, thank you so much. That was really cool. That was awesome to see. And I've used Warp VR and it is pretty fun. I feel like I'm on the tarmac learning how to evacuate in an airfield. So I want to turn it over to Chris, who's also working in the world of VR and just doing transformative things to train the next generation of workers. So Chris, please let us hear what you're doing. Oh, Chris, I think you're on mute, but we'll get you off here.
Sorry, thank you, Michael. Sorry about the technical difficulties. And thank you for including me on this panel, the future of scalable training and tech. My name's Chris. I'm the CEO of Grasp. And my background is in the film production industry, and I was able to do some really innovative work in virtual reality. And while I was getting an MBA at UCLA Anderson, I think there's some other UCLA people here, I met my co-founder, and we really did a lot, dived into researching the powers of the technology of virtual reality for training and learning. And I really believe, because everyone's talking about how you learn by doing, you learn through experience, you learn through mistakes, that the immersive interactiveness of virtual reality as a technology is really going to be the future of education, training, and learning. So we have a quick video that we can play, and then I'll start with the presentation. Thanks.
What we engineered Grasp to do is to really make VR training accessible.
My name is Kyle Kazniak. I've been a chef for 15 years. Today I'm working with Grasp. We're going to be doing VR training with these awesome motion capture gloves. So I'll be able to actually cook all these menu items with my hands, and this translates all into VR.
We wanted to be able to provide a solution that lowers the cost of training. And so by focusing on virtual reality as a technology, we're able to be more immersive and to provide more utility to really reduce the amount of time training takes for restaurants.
It's cutting edge technology. I never thought something like this would exist, and now it's going to be helping my business grow and get to the complete next level. This is going to capture all my movements, so when we're training other people, they see exactly how I cook these menu items, and they can go on themselves and practice and score on it.
It's both the training and the evaluation aspect is what makes Grasp unique in the marketplace.
I'm just really excited to see this in production and actually see the results from it, because my life is going to be exponentially easier when we start having this train. Won't have to be on site as often, and just it's exciting.
Thank you. So our platform right now is geared specific. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep, you're good, Chris. Keep going. You're all right.
Okay, sorry. So our platform is for the hospitality and the retail industry, and because they have really high turnover employee churn. So around $6,000 an employee when you're double paying people because you're paying the trainer and the person learning, and it takes about 2 weeks to train somebody, and even then we've noticed that after VR training they're much more confident, 4 times more confident, and so when they continue training, their training is much more effective. And virtual reality is completely consistent because in this industry, many other industries, you really, when you're having someone that's training you one-on-one, it could be different by how passionate they are about the training. So next slide, please. So PwC came out with a study, and there's many more studies, that virtual reality has a very high learning retention rate, and that's why it's very effective for learning and training. 75% versus if you have a lecture, it's about 10%. If you're just reading material, that's about 5%. And you learn 4 times faster than traditional learning methods. At scale, and even not necessarily at scale, depending how it's launched, it's much more it's much more cost effective. So really, we're trying to, through using technology of virtual reality and interactiveness, we're increasing employee engagement, we're increasing employee retention, and then operational efficiency, which leads to cost savings. Next, please. So this translates to about $800. This is for the food service industry by leveraging VR. Now, our platform can be used for many other industries, and we're making it more of a self-service SaaS as you go platform that can be adapted, and I'll go more into that. But I just wanted to quickly mention really quickly the difference there's different types of virtual reality. There's traditional kind of 360 video, which you kind of seen with Warp VR and some other people, which is really engaging, and a lot of these numbers come from that. Then there's 6 degrees of freedom, which is more, think of a shooter game where you're immersed, and it's a really great way to see it is 3 degrees of freedom, which is traditional 360 video. Think of just your head and neck, so turning. But 6 degrees of freedom, think you have legs and you can, and a torso, and you can go around and walk around a space. So our Grasp platform is a 6 degree of freedom platform, or combines kind of the two, which I call it 4.5 degree. But next slide, please. So being able to, today, and after what we had to deal with the last year, the remote training is a very huge plus. So you can hand someone, also, for instance, in the kitchen, when they're slammed with new orders and it's a really high time where the kitchen gets slammed, they don't have time to have someone to train. They're kind of an extra person that's more of a hindrance. So they can say, here, take this headset and go into the office and learn all the dishes while we're slammed, and then come back and we'll go over it some more. And we want to make this what's great about some of these e-learning platforms have done the same thing, that all the data from people learning is directly accessible to management. And so our platform, like WorkVR, is a SaaS platform. So it's per location, per headset. We are looking to move on also to devices such as iPads. But right now we're exclusively a VR headset platform, but we're hardware agnostic. So with the Oculus Quest, we also do the Pico. So there's different ways to get this training out to people. Next, please. So we're saving time here. We're in days instead of weeks of onboarding new employees. And so we're really bringing this technology to enterprise to, again, it's not only cutting costs, but increasing sales. The one on the left, we have also customer interaction, where you learn what to say, you learn on the point of sale screen what to press, and then there's the testing mode where the training wheels come off, and it's between you and the customer, or in this case, they're AI characters, that you can change what they're saying or what they're ordering on the platform and adjust it bespoke specifically to your organization. Next, please. So our customers, and I have if anyone wants to see, I can show a little more of this, but they're able to monitor, and sometimes if they have a learning management system, that data can be implemented through XAPI standard. They can adjust if their menu changes, or there's something new that comes up, such as they want to do training of what do you do if a customer doesn't want to put on their mask and there's a mandate. How do you handle that? What if there's a fly in somebody's suit? How do you handle that? So if things come up, it's not traditionally like locked into this application. You can adjust it online and press publish and then put the headset on, and now you have a different environment, a different character, different dialogue. So for our current platform pricing, it's about $100 a month per location. Next,
Chris, we're actually running up against the clock here. Would you be able to just give us a summary in about 30 seconds, and then I'll turn it over to Robert for closing remarks?
Absolutely. So Grasp, we're using 6 Degree of Freedom immersive interactive technology that's really going to be the future of learning. And we have a platform that you can make it bespoke and customized to your organization. And we really want you learn by doing, and we want to help you do and make mistakes. And so you're 4 times more confident and you learn 4 times faster.
Chris and all of our panelists, thank you so much for attending today. I'm going to turn it over to Robert for a quick closing remark. This presentation will be sent out to the entire group. I'm sorry we didn't get to more actual questions, but we have the chat here and we'll follow up and you'll have everyone's contact. So Robert.
Right. Brett Helferson is our board director and was going to do the closing. But for time here, I just want to thank everybody. And this is the beginning of a conversation, a beginning of bringing together the technology world with our workforce development world. And I really do want to say I learned so much today myself, and was really wrapped in all of the presentations. So thank you very much. And Mike, again, to you and your team, you guys did a fantastic job. So on behalf of Brett and the board, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you soon. Be in touch.